So was this document available to everyone, or this was on their actual website and someone found it?
That is correct. It was on the NASA website, and it was a document that actually is a PowerPoint presentation by Dennis Bushnell, the chief NASA scientist at the Langley Center. And it was presented in 2001, July of 2001, just a few months before 9/11. When we first came across it, it says on the website, Future Strategic Issues, Future Warfare circa 2025. On page 4, it said the presentation is based in all cases upon existing data, trends, analysis technologies, no pixie dust. And the entire premise of the document, or the PowerPoint, is about robots, cyborgs, and humans. On page 93, it said capture Americans in living color on prime time. Then it's followed up by saying terror attacks within the continental United States using biologicals take down critical infrastructure. They are going to use an EMP, which is an electromagnetic pulse. They're going to use radiation frequencies against our brains, etc.
In the early part of 1999, a website under the name of www.carnicom.com was created to call attention to the unusual events and effects surrounding aircraft activity over the southwestern desert skies of the United States. The developer of that site was a generally quiet and conservative former federal employee with no political or environmental notoriety. Within a matter of days, it was apparent that this site was immediately drawing attention from a broad host of high-level government and military agencies, defense contractors, research organizations, chemical and pharmaceutical companies, and health organizations. This interest was documented on this same site for a period of several months, by which time an obvious pattern of monitoring the developing research was apparent. Over the next few years, a glaring disparity had evolved. On one hand, a high level of monitoring of documentation, sampling methods, research, analysis, and disclosure efforts was now documented. On the other, a campaign of continuous dismissal of the significance of the issue and a refusal to investigate was conducted by those very same visitors. You are now seeing a small sample of these frequent visitors and monitoring agencies and companies, such as the Pentagon, multiple Air Force bases, the United States Senate, aircraft manufacturers, pharmaceutical and drug companies, national security, intelligence and emergency agencies, weapon and defense system contractors, research organizations, and the media.
On this same page 93, they say exploit CNN syndrome. Now, CNN, of course, is the network, the news media network, propaganda machine, and was set up by the CIA. You can watch the movie called Psy-War on stopthecrime.net for all the background information on CNN.
I just want to know, I want someone in an official capacity to speak about it openly. Because whenever something happens, and like I said, I've learned an awful lot about human beings through this process. Because I insist that this is happening, that this is real, and that it's not normal. That there's something happening, there's something under the table going on that's not being talked about, and yet it's happening in broad daylight, visibly. It's affecting everybody. It's certainly, it's no longer the joy it used to be to go hiking in the mountains, to go outside to ride my bike.
You see this flare of light. This is a sonic flare. It's coming up directly from that. It's heating up the clouds in the sky. You see they're actually hot. It's causing heat in the sky and in the clouds, coming down way over there It's actually skipping off the ionosphere and coming back down. This is an inlet from the ocean on the eastern shore of Brazil.
A variety of electromagnetic devices have been developed and used. This investigation has resulted from the plausible hypothesis that the atmosphere has now been modified into what is called a plasma state, or an electrified gas. Testing has produced a variety of indications that this hypothesis is indeed correct, and that the atmosphere is regularly being used for electromagnetic applications. ELF energy is of special concern because of its direct connection to the health aspects of the electromagnetic nature of human beings. Artificial pulse energy appears to now have been detected on a variety of occasions, and evidence indicates that it is now a part of our unseen environment. Electrolysis methods have further confirmed the existence of unexpected ionizing metallic salts within our atmosphere. HAARP, or High Active Auroral Research Program, is operated by the U.S. Air Force and is claimed to be simply a research facility. The stated purpose by the Air Force for the HAARP project is that of a scientific endeavor aimed at studying the properties and behavior of the ionosphere, with particular emphasis on being able to understand and use it to enhance communications and surveillance systems for both civilian and defense purposes. It may be this, and then again, it may be more than simply a scientific endeavor.
We are seeing one of the strangest global events of our lifetimes. Power companies in the USA, Canada, Europe, Japan, and who knows where else, who have no business other than to safely deliver utility services to us, have been enlisted by some global agenda to install radiation-emitting surveillance devices on our homes that they are calling smart meters. The reason that this is so strange is that even after we have told them that these devices are dangerous, harmful, unlawful, and invasive, they flatly ignore us and continue to attempt the installations as if we were speaking to a hole in the ground.
The amount of power inherent in the design of the HAARP project is further indicated by Mr. Eastland stating that the present invention can be formed to simulate or perform the same functions as a detonation of a heave-type nuclear device without actually having to detonate such a device. A heave weapon has the effect of lifting the magnetic field of the Earth itself and involves the expenditure of massive amounts of energy. The patent is further stated to have numerous military implications, including the enhancement of or interference with communication and guidance systems, including those of airplanes and missiles, radar interference, missile destruction, weather modification, material transport of micron-sized particles, and molecular change of the atmosphere are each mentioned as further applications of the patent design. The executive summary for the HAARP project also specifically mentions forcing the descent of particles from the atmosphere toward the ground using ELF radiation from HAARP. Clearly, environmental modifications, the electromagnetic transfer of energy, and military operations of global impact are already in sight from the existence of these aerosols within our atmosphere.
On page 66, they say increasingly critical are human limitations and human downsides. Humans are too large, humans are too heavy, too tender, humans are too slow, both physically and mentally, and we require huge logistical trains, meaning we cost way too much money to maintain, and humans have rapidly decreasing to negative value. Can you even believe this? I mean, you're hearing this, and it's got to be rather shocking coming off of a NASA website, particularly when some of the agencies that are involved are the U.S. Air Force, DARPA, the CIA, the FBI, Southern Command, Atlantic Command, Australian Department of Defense, and other agencies. This is the corporation's agencies. We are USA Inc. We're no longer under a constitution as proclaimed in the Iron Mountain Report, which everyone should read. The stealth and deceptive, incrementally positioned attacks upon the Constitution have rendered us now a corporation. We are being controlled by corporations and banks that are posing as a legitimate government. This is not just in the United States. This is a global planned attack and assault with technologies beyond most people's comprehension. On page 9, humans have taken over and vastly shortened evolution. They're going to direct evolution. They believe, the bankers, the global elites, believe that they have accomplished immortality. And they're doing that, again, keeping in mind that this entire document is about robots, cyborgs, and humans. They've already mapped our brains. We've just recently heard that they can transfer a human brain into machinery. So whenever they tell us that this is a new scientific discovery, we know it's been decades and decades prior to us ever finding out about these things. Microdust is a weapon. They say that this micron-sized mechanized dust, which is distributed as an aerosol and inhaled into the lungs, the dust mechanically bores into the lung tissue and executes various pathological missions. And then they talk about how the use of frequencies will be used in warfare. And we know, for example, the smart meters that are being deployed around the globe, the replacement of our electric meters, they talk about the use of low frequencies, microwave frequencies. The U.S. Army report is on our website, smartmetersmurder.com. It's about a 20-page Army document that talks about the use of frequencies to target the enemy. We're the enemy. And they say 100% of the human population will be affected. They're jamming our immune systems with these frequencies. Of the chemtrails and all of the nanofibers that are being dropped, which is phase 1 of the first protocol. It is no longer a debate about smart meters. We don't need any more scientists or doctors saying people are getting sick. The frequencies have multiple purposes.
We know now that our power companies were perfectly aware of the problems with these meters from the beginning. And they even developed and planned strategies to withhold information about the meters, to install the devices without our knowledge or consent, to lie to us about what the digital meters are and what they do, and refuse to provide verifiable answers to questions about those meters. They could not have sent a more clear signal that the meters are not in our interest. Our power companies have allowed themselves to become partisans and to become enemies of their customers' health, safety, and privacy in some strange and new program to collect data and possibly harm everyone who has a utility meter. The new digital meters are designed to do things utility meters don't need to do. And power companies refuse to explain why they are so determined to push this on us. Most of us have become very dependent on our utilities, and our dependency is now being exploited by a global matrix called the smart grid, designed for massive collection and centralization of personal data.
What do you think the solution is to all of this multi-level attack that's been going on for a very long time?
Well, I think the solution is that people need to become educated as rapidly as possible. And there are documents that are, for example, the Silent Weapons Quiet Wars document. It's a 41-page document. It's on our website. This lays out, it's an operations, research, and technical manual. This document was the 1954 Bilderberg policy at the first Bilderberg meeting. And this laid out the strategy to control the human population. But the very last statement in this document It says, Factor 6, cattle. Those who will not use their brains are no better off than those who have no brains. And so this mindless school of jellyfish, father, mother, son, and daughter, become useful beasts of burden, or trainers of the same. So what they say in this document is they will dole out poisonous foods. It's not what we need, but it's what we want, and those that decide to eat these foods will have the consequences of that. They tell us how they set up all the social engineering, how they devise the family, how they crumble the family, how they set up the war machine, how they influence thinking in the family unit to allow the family to give up their children to war for a rich man's fodder. So they set themselves up to protect us, to keep us crippled, to numb us down with foods so that our pineal gland is interfered with. We're never able to reach our higher consciousness. And right now, the massive fluoridation across the United States is to collapse the ability for us to think. They're shutting us down right now. And they've come up with the fear-based scientific fraudulent information that people are now accepting. They're rewriting history and they're rewriting science with the idea that people are using too much resources. We have to reduce CO2 and reduce our greenhouse gas emissions. And that is flying through every city across the world right now. It's written into all local government documents, and cities now are, California, for example, with the CARB initiative, where we have to actually pay for the air we breathe, and we're taxed for the air. But it's all based on the false pollution that is not false. They've created the pollution. When you look at the Iron Mountain document, you will see the methods in which they were going to create pollution. They even say that they will deforest us, and they're doing that with the chemtrail, the secret chemtrail or geoengineering program or weather modification. Actually, that program has multiple layers. Not only does it increase weather events, we're being hit globally. They're hitting our food supply. It does reduce our food supply. It will increase the cost of our food. It's changing the pH in the soil, which will then fit to the prescribed Monsanto mega corporation food takeover of the globe. That is the intention of Monsanto, is global food domination. If everyone understands the fraud, then we will be able to eliminate this.
NOAA's original data for a naturally occurring, quote, condensation trail was 70 below and 70% humidity. They've since scrubbed that from the net, just like they do after a nuclear accident. They suddenly change the, quote, safe levels and up them by 10,000%. So, you know, the science is completely flexible when it comes to governmental agencies, but these trails that we see that linger and cover the sky to such a degree, George, that now global dimming, another term people aren't familiar with probably, is estimated right now to be 20%. That means 20% of the sun's direct rays are no longer reaching the surface of the planet. There's a hell of a lot of metal up there, and we know that for a fact from our testing. And this is called solar obscuration. That's the goal of geoengineering, to block the sun. As you diminish sunlight, you diminish evaporation. No question, it's the light photons that break the water molecules loose that help cause evaporation. Now, another thing that's known about geoengineering is it diminishes wind as well. So along with the global dimming, you have reduced wind, which also reduces evaporation. So even though overall the planet is getting warmer, and that's a fact that I think few dispute at this point, it should be raining more, not less. And the only reason it can be raining less is an atmosphere full of particulates. With the military-industrial complex, many layers to the onion as far as why they are doing this. From all available data, it looks like they started these programs as far back as the late 40s. It looked like, as always, such programs start for the desire for more control and power. And my conclusions are, as these programs evolved and were used strategically, more and more damage has begun to occur in the atmosphere. The atmosphere is horrifically damaged now, by the way, and this is not about Al Gore or carbon credits. It's about reality. You combine aluminum with mercury under the right conditions, toxicity can increase up to 10,000%. So it's not just the lethalness of either metal independently. When they are combined, they become much more harmful. On the strategic implications, in recent years, we've seen countries, for example, like Pakistan, when they seem to be showing resistance to U.S. objectives, suddenly 20% of their country is underwater. In Thailand, a similar circumstance, the Thai government was reluctant to allow the U.S. to put a, quote, weather observation base there, which they probably realized was a weather modification base. Okay. And suddenly Thailand's under record floods and underwater. And so,
does it appear that all administrations are supporting geoengineering?
It does. Elements that show up every time, aluminum, barium, strontium, every time they're tested for. I've been contacted by researchers from Norway and Germany that are testing there as well, and in their last, I believe, 60 rain tests, they are now seeing fluoride, abundant amounts of fluoride, and they have eliminated any possible industrial source. So it appears that fluoride now may be in the mix. Now, there could be a number of reasons for this. You know, the obvious one, perhaps, if we won't drink it in the water, they'll rain it down on us. And they've found fluoride in the last 60 tests. They've eliminated any industrial source. Can't account for even a fraction of it. Based on their studies so far, is that one potential use of that, if fluoride nanoparticles are exposed to certain frequencies, they believe they coagulate, which would come together. So in theory, if you had when you fill the atmosphere with these aerosols, you diminish and disperse rainfall. As the rain comes across the Pacific Northwest, I mean, we are sprayed here extremely heavily. This is the storm track. And in my particular location, in the last 7 years, we're almost 200 inches of rain short in my particular location. So this rain is migrated over us in the form of a very expansive, industrial, toxic-looking cloud. And if it was seeded with the right particulates, in this case perhaps fluoride, and it's exposed to the right frequencies from an ionosphere heater like HAARP, and they coagulate, then they could cause precipitation to begin to fall again wherever they chose. So the fact that they're doing it, and the fact that we're all being exposed to a grand experiment without our choice or consent, and ingesting or inhaling this metal that's slowly but surely clogging up our organisms, that part is beyond debate. But people that are involved with these programs have no idea what they're doing. I certainly believe that's the case. I don't believe our military brothers and sisters would intentionally do this to us. I don't believe that for a minute. I believe they're being told they're involved with some benevolent planet-saving act for the common good. A scientist has told me from within a major university that's involved with geoengineering that she believes she's seeing defections, that people are who were told these programs were benevolent and now realize because of the data that's being put out that they're anything but, and they're refusing to participate with these programs. And that's what we hope will begin to happen on a much larger scale.
Those of you who may not be too privy to chemistry, you know that there's natural elements occurring in Earth. Aluminum is one of them. However, barium, radioactive, and strontium are not. So I conducted those samples and saw limits in my community that would make your head spin. And I started to realize that those peers within my professional community that were trying to wake those of us in the military up were right. Well, I lived about a mile behind the flight line at Tinker Air Force Base. So I started conducting my old soil grid sampling. And what was coming back was high PNAs, which are polynuclear aromatic materials that are naturally occurring in Earth, but it's usually associated to something man-made when it's that high.
Right.
I was getting barium, aluminum, and even though some of these items are naturally occurring in Earth, the compounds that they came back in were all industrialized.
About what time was this? What year?
This was around 2007, 2008.
Okay.
Contacted EPA in my region, and they have nothing to say about it.
They had nothing to say. The EPA.
No.
It may also be enlightening to consider United States Patent 4686605 by Bernard Eastlund in 1987 entitled, "A Method and Apparatus for Altering a Region in the Earth's Atmosphere, Ionosphere, and/or Magnetosphere." There are many who have sensibly concluded that this patent essentially represents a blueprint for the HARP facility as it has been constructed. This patent makes mention of numerous objectives and methods of operation that far exceed any scientific endeavor alone, and references the work of Nikola Tesla as a source of historical contribution. The amazing inventions and achievements of Tesla with respect to energy transfer and amplification, including the use of the atmosphere as a medium for sending energy from point A to point B, are well documented. The documents of Tesla were eventually confiscated at the close of his life, especially as they related to military matters, and he is generally now accepted as an unrecognized genius. The current incarnation of ionospheric heating is able to, according to Mr. Eastlund, put unprecedented amounts of power in the Earth's atmosphere at strategic locations, and to maintain that power level with the pulsing of energy. This patent also recommends the use of large clouds of barium so that ionization by sunlight will increase the electron density within the plasma environment.
Theoretically, scientists can cool the Earth using chemical compounds placed in the upper atmosphere. But could other substances be put there for more ominous purposes? Military victory or defeat can depend on the weather. A commander who can control the weather has a weapon as powerful as any Air Force.
Jäger der Bundeswehr manipulieren unsere Wetterkarten. Diese Vermutung von Bonner Wetterfröschen ist jetzt bestätigt. Unheimliche Geisterwolken mit einer Länge von 350 Kilometern tauchen plötzlich auf den Radarschirmen auf. Allerdings nur auf dem Wetterradar. Einmal im Sommer 2005 und einmal im März 2006. Und es geht schon wieder los. Derzeit gibt es neue Luftkampfübungen über dem Hunsrück. Die Bundeswehr warnte jetzt erstmals die Wetterdienste vor verfälschten Radarbildern in den kommenden 3 Wochen.
The most advanced military agencies, intelligence services, and defense contractors clearly have an interest in monitoring and controlling the level of discussion and disclosure on the aerosol issue. The tools of research and analysis must therefore be used at least in part to compensate for the lack of openness that now shrouds this democracy under the guise of national security. A glimpse into the military window has been achieved, and a central theme will eventually emerge, and that is of control. Control in the deepest and far-reaching sense that you may imagine. For when the atmosphere of the planet is controlled, life itself, in the end, is controlled. You know, this has been prophesized. We call it the death winds. We always thought that it would be nuclear fallout, but maybe this is the death winds.
Alex Merklinger's Mysteries of the Mind. It is the world that has been pulled over our eyes.
As you know, I've been a pilot for over 40 years I've been flying. I stopped counting my hours at 3,500 hours, which is a fair amount. I've owned 7 airplanes in my life. I have ratings all the way up to twin IFR. I am not jet rated, but everything else. But today, Clifford, when all of a sudden you see these trails in the sky in the morning when you wake up, and by late morning, early afternoon, the sky is totally overcast. It is not natural. The government and other people say, oh, well, that's a contrail. Condensation, contrail, that all planes do at a certain altitude. And I said, you don't know what you're talking about. Yes, there are contrails. Go back to World War II, we had contrails, but they didn't last. This was, in those days, it was condensation of moisture. And then it dissipates after, I don't know, maybe depending on the altitude, maybe a minute, maybe a little over a minute, but around a minute, and it's gone. These things last all day long, unless there's a strong wind and it blows out of the way. Now it's gotten so bad, and I talk to people, as you know, all over the world, and it's happening almost every country that I'm aware of in the world. We have listeners in at least 50 countries that we know of, and people are always reporting back. If we get into a discussion or times that you have been on the show before, people come back and just report incredible experiences. They have a lot of respiratory problems. They never had that before. People are having a lot of sinus problems. They've never had that before. And it's always after they have been inundated with some of these sprays. You also asked about, how do people feel about it? They are extremely concerned because there seems to be something that is happening that is affecting them physically and in some cases even emotionally and psychologically.
The notion that these guys have that the fix for our disrupted climate is to fly as many jets as possible around the planet, spewing as much toxic metal particulate pollution as you can possibly spit out. The notion that that's a cure for climate disruption, it's about as insane as it gets, and certainly we can see from all available data that that appears to be the largest source of climate disruption, as we would expect it to be.
It is a fact, however unpleasant and distressing the consideration may be, that biological components have been repeatedly identified in a series of tests of atmospheric samples over a period of several years. The U.S. Environmental Protection Agency has refused to identify physical material that has been demonstrated to contain biologicals of this same form. These components appear to involve the use of desiccation, freeze-drying, and aerosol distribution methods, exactly the same methods itemized within the private contractor listings of the Senate hearings. Evidence further indicates that extremely advanced biotechnical methods are likely to be a part of the development and delivery process. To date, no professional or public medical professionals have attempted to duplicate the test methods and results, and the evidence continues to be provided only through independent citizen activism. Acknowledgement and response to this evidence by all public officials remains lacking. There is currently no prospect of government hearings on the aerosol issue, and the reality of the evidence continues to be denied by public officials. It is at least a theoretical reality that a plasma sheath around the Earth can accumulate energy. This originates from the combination of increased electron density and low-frequency energy propagation. And you have been shown evidence that aircraft can alter and have altered the fragile envelope for life that we call the atmosphere. You have seen science and sampling applied to the problem over and over at the grassroots level. Numerous methods have been demonstrated that show artificial and deliberate modification of the atmosphere, including its chemical, thermal, electromagnetic, and physical properties. There are detrimental effects that can be anticipated and that have been observed as a result of these changes in our air for dominion and control. the doctor, the journalist, the scientist, the lawyer, the politician, the environmentalist, the activist, the author, the filmmaker, the fundraiser, the organizer. You must all assume your roles openly, publicly, and quickly to offer any real hope for our survival. I make this appeal to you. This documentary is a not-for-profit venture. It has been made with an appeal to you personally in mind. It may be freely copied in its entirety and distributed. No individual is permitted to distribute this documentary with a profit motive. It has been created for the benefit of the public. Please help us to restore and regain the world that you know can exist.